Good evening. The television and radio stations of the United States and their affiliated stations are proud to provide facilities for a discussion of issues in the current political campaign by the two major candidates for the presidency. The candidates need no introduction. The Republican candidate, Vice President Richard M. Nixon, and the Democratic candidate, Senator John F. Kennedy.
The 1960 presidential debates, held from September 26 through October 21st between Vice President Richard Nixon and Senator John F. Kennedy, was broadcast on both the radio and television, garnering the attention of around 100 million viewers in total. The airing of the debates occurred due to the increasing popularity of televisions throughout households in the United States. The debates proved to have a lasting impact, as presidential debates have become a staple in American politics. As a result of the debates, the importance of television in American politics became a crucial turning point in elections, as debates today serve as advertisements for politicians. For some voters, American politics have become a form of entertainment, and debates today have adopted this same sentiment, as candidates now try to create polarization by constantly attacking their opponents, making debates less informative but still greatly important in U.S. politics. Prior to the 1950s, most Americans received information through the radio. As time progressed, the television became increasingly popular among American households, replacing radios throughout the country. From 1949 to 1959, it was estimated that the amount of televisions owned in households across the U.S. grew from 1 million to over 50 million. As this change became evident to politicians, many began creating new campaign advertisements on television to appeal to voters. One famous example of this occurred in the 1952 presidential election, when Republican Dwight D. Eisenhower released his campaign jingle titled "I Like Ike" in an effort to emphasize his personality. When Eisenhower won the 1952 election and became president, he held the first televised presidential press conference and had utilized television throughout his presidency. Kennedy and his campaign staff realized how crucial television had been in communicating with the American public, so they proposed a debate between him and Vice President Richard Nixon to highlight Kennedy's views and strengths to voters. Ultimately, this created a long-standing tradition in American politics. On January 2, 1960, Senator John F. Kennedy of Massachusetts, who had attempted to receive the vice presidential nomination in 1956, announced his candidacy for the presidency. A week later, on January 9th, Republican Vice President Richard Nixon, who served under Eisenhower's administration, declared that he too would be seeking the presidency. During his time as vice president, Nixon had participated in many debates, such as the kitchen debate with Nikita Khrushchev. The debate showcased to the American public Nixon's debate experience and highlighted his capabilities. Kennedy, who was running for the Democratic nomination, was a young senator who had been in the House for 3 terms and had been elected to the Senate in 1952. Kennedy and his campaign staff proposed the idea of holding a series of debates on television. When Nixon heard of his offer, he was hesitant to accept because he knew the debates would give Kennedy much-needed exposure. In his memoirs, Nixon stated, "An incumbent seldom agrees willingly to debate his challenger, and I knew that the debates would benefit Kennedy more than me by giving his views national exposure, which he needed more than I did. But there was no way I could refuse to debate without having Kennedy and the media turn my refusal into a central campaign issue." Ultimately, Nixon accepted the offer. Leading up to the debates, Congress also suspended the equal time provision to prevent third-party candidates from needing to have the same amount of time on television as the 2 main candidates. On September 26, the first of 4 presidential debates was held in Chicago, Illinois, and was broadcast by CBS. The debate was centered around domestic issues, as suggested by Nixon's campaign staff, who knew that Nixon's forte was foreign policy and expected the audience to grow as the debates went on. Around 66.4 million people viewed the first debate, making it the largest television event in United States history. Famously in the first debate, Nixon looked pale and disheveled due to a recent knee injury. Chicago Mayor Richard Daley, who had viewed the first debate and was horrified by Nixon's appearance, said, "My God, they've embalmed him before he even died." Kennedy, on the other hand, wore a suit that contrasted with the background of the set and had spent the past few weeks tanning in preparation for the debate. This historic moment gave rise to the idea that those who listened on the radio believed that Nixon had won, while those who viewed the debate on the television believed that Kennedy had won. In reality, this idea was only supported by a singular poll. Nixon also received criticism from his party, as many thought that he was being too gentle on Kennedy and agreeing with him too much. Kennedy himself even believed that he had performed greatly in the first debate, telling the debate's moderator Howard K. Smith that he believed he won the election that night. Immediately after the first debate, Kennedy rose by 3 points according to Gallup Polling Institute. In both the second and third debates, Nixon took the offensive and attacked Kennedy more intensely, with certain Democrats such as the governor of South Carolina, James Burns, stating that he had energized his base the same way Kennedy had in the first debate. The third debate had also demonstrated how far technology had come in recent years, as Kennedy attended the debate electronically in New York while Nixon attended it from Los Angeles. The final debate, broadcast by ABC on October 21st, focused on foreign policy. Because there had been no other reference point for how viewership trends would be throughout the debates, foreign policy was covered last as suggested by Nixon's campaign staff. Polls conducted by Gallup had shown that by the time the debates had ended, Kennedy had risen by a few points, likely due to a small boost that candidates get after a series of debates conclude. Some argued that the small boost given to Kennedy was what actually won him the election, though, due to how close the results were. In hindsight, it is evident that the post-debate momentum was likely a decisive element in securing Kennedy's victory in an election that was defined by its razor-thin margins. Kyle Kondik, the managing editor of Sabato's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia Center for Politics, agreed to answer the question, was there much for Nixon to gain from participating in the debates?
Arguably, it was a mistake for Nixon to agree to the debates, and in fact, Eisenhower even suggested maybe he shouldn't do it. Eisenhower was the outgoing president at the time, and Nixon, was better known, more established, and so a common kind of front-runner strategy is just not to do the debate. And so we've seen this very recently with Donald Trump in the Republican presidential primary. He is the leading candidate. He has no reason to, he can't really benefit from the debates, or at least he feels that way. And his lack of participation has not really hurt him. I think it's reasonable to think, that it may have been a mistake for Nixon to participate. However, Nixon really wanted to use the debates to highlight his experience in foreign policy, which was a place where he felt strong and JFK had things to prove. So again, I think we can sort of see from how Nixon handled his 68 and 72 campaigns. If he thought the debates in 1960 had been some great success for him, probably would have tried to do them in 68 and 72, but obviously he didn't. Again, it's really hard to know if the election would have turned out differently without the debates. Seems reasonable to think that they could have, but who knows?
On November 8, 1960, John F. Kennedy was declared the winner of the 1960 election, garnering 303 electoral votes in comparison to Nixon's 219. The 1960 election, to this day, has been one of the closest in United States history, with Kennedy only winning the popular vote by a mere 112,000 votes. The debates helped shift politics in the direction of television and campaigning via political advertisements. In the following elections, candidates created more political ads that attacked their opponents, such as the famous Daisy ad that was created by Lyndon B. Johnson to attack Barry Goldwater, which aimed to create fear among voters. The 1960 debates proved to be influential throughout the rest of the century and even into today due to the precedent that they set. In the subsequent elections, no debates between candidates occurred until 1976, largely because of the idea that a well-known candidate could give their opponent an advantage by agreeing to debate them. The debates also introduced the idea that looks matter in politics. Though the idea that Nixon's sickly appearance during the first debate changed the results of the election has proven to be overblown, it led other politicians to believe that their looks mattered much more now than it had in the past. After 1976, when Ford agreed to debate Carter, the debates became a permanent staple of presidential elections. This set the precedent that candidates needed to focus more on their appearances and personality rather than state their actual policies to voters. As a result, some voters oftentimes consider a candidate's appearance and personality more over their actual policies, leading certain voters to feel as if they have been misled by the candidate. Today, presidential elections are still heavily impacted by televised debates. They particularly help candidates in primary elections who are relatively unknown to the general public and allow them to introduce their views. Presidential debates are most influential in close elections, as seen in both 1960 and 2000. Today, though, as the United States becomes more polarized, debates do not sway voters as much as they used to. The 1960 presidential debates proved to be a major turning point in United States politics by introducing the idea that appearance can have a profound effect on a voter's choice and influencing the way that campaigns are structured around television. Though the presidential debates of today are not as likely to sway voters between two candidates, the legacy of the debates between Kennedy and Nixon lives on due to its profound impact on American elections and politics.